We see a cameraman named Choi setting up the camera to go live, while a hunter introduces himself as Ilum. Ilum mentions that he has brought a hot lady with him for today's broadcast. The world is half destroyed thanks to the appearance of monsters, which created an opportunity for people to become rich and famous by using this depressing circumstance. They call themselves the monster streamer. Normal civilians who have lost their family to monsters get secondary satisfaction from seeing hunters kill monsters. But not all monster streamers get famous like Ilum. Choi is shocked to see that Ilum is doing anything to gain subscribers, even using a hot lady for a dance after the hunt. Ilum mentions that today he will hunt a simian, a one-star monster. He claims that there are only 86 hunters in the country who can hunt one-star monsters alone, and he wants to change that number today. Choi warns him that he is too weak, but Ilum ignores him and activates his superpower. Superpowers are only allowed for a few select talented humans, and Choi has no talent. Ilum shoots fire at the monster and flaunts himself in the live stream, but the monster is still alive and attacks them from behind. Ilum leaves the hot lady behind and runs alone, but the simian kills her and starts following Ilum again. This time, Ilum uses Choi as bait. Ilum hops into his car and says, "It's much better that a hunter like me survives than a porter like you, right?" Choi remembers what his father told him in his childhood about God protecting him. Choi shouts, "What the hell is God doing right now?" Suddenly, he gets a notification that the viewer count is 1. While he tries to dodge the monster's attack, he suddenly jumps very high, and he wonders what just happened to him and what the message was. Choi again gets a notification that a certain god is puzzled. Choi hides behind a tree and thinks that even if he gets hit once, he will die. Another notification pops up, telling him that a certain god is preparing popcorn. Choi checks his backpack, which he stole from Dora the Explorer, and finds some fighting equipment. He attacks the monster, but it doesn't even scratch the monster. The monster picks up a huge boulder using all its strength, but Choi somehow dodges it. Choi doesn't have any superpower, so he works harder, exercises every day to survive, and researches by looking at hunters' hunting strategies. He thinks that he only has one chance to attack the monster if he wants to win. Choi gets behind the monster's back and inserts his weapon forcefully inside the monster's buttock. The monster cries in agony. It's worth noting that Choi did this when a god was watching him. Choi took advantage of the opportunity and attacked the monster once again, successfully killing it. The entire fight was captured on camera and live-streamed for everyone to see. To their surprise, the cameraman was the one who killed the monster on his own. Exhausted and in disbelief, Choi received a notification from a certain god who was very satisfied and had called over a friend to view the stream. As a result, Choi's viewer count increased to 2. All those who were watching the stream were astonished to see a cameraman take down a Sylvian. Choi checked the live stream and realized that the whole fight had gone live on broadcast. He then saw a notification indicating that 3 gods were currently viewing his stream. He believed that his strength increased as more gods came to see him. He greeted his viewers, and they informed him that the rescue squad was on their way and had already reported about Hunter Ilum. Suddenly, Choi remembered the hot lady Hanwell and approached her to check if she was alive. However, the rescue team arrived, and Choi left the check up to them. He live-streamed the rescue team's process and explained that their main objective was to extract the monster's core, which was a mysterious material that only existed inside monsters' bodies. It was the origin of a monster's life and strength. As the rescue team worked to extract the core, something disgusting started coming out of the girl's body. A notification revealed that one of the gods was taking out his popcorn, presumably to watch the gruesome scene. Suddenly, the monster engulfed the rescue squad members, and Choi suspected it was an Undertox. An Undertox is a 1-star monster that controls lethal toxins and poisons. It hides under an injured person and poisons any human that comes to help, increasing its prey count. It's a sly and fierce monster. The rescue squad commanded everyone to abandon the girl and retrieve the Sylvian's core, but Choi refused to give up. He checked Dora the Explorer's backpack and found a flamethrower. He used it to attack the slimy monster with fire. The rescue squad intervened and insisted that they needed the corpses intact to return them to their families. However, Choi believed that they should do everything they could to save the victims before they turned into corpses. He ran towards the van, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and set up his camera on his shoulders. He explained that an undertox was an elemental-type monster that primarily fed on a human's vitality. If they neutralized its poison with fire, it would weaken and become helpless. Choi didn't value human life, nor did he have a heroic mind. His actions were entirely calculated, and his goal was to secure this opportunity to firmly establish himself as a monster streamer. He believed that to take vengeance for his family, he needed power and influence. Choi informed his audience that the heat from the fire was a fatal weakness for undertox. It could neutralize the poison, which was the monster's main form of attack, making it weak and helpless. When an undertox was cornered with no way of attacking, it would make one of two choices. It would either abandon its prey or use the host to put up a final struggle. The monster took over the girl's body and attacked Choi, but he, being a Sigma male by birth, attacked the girl directly in the face. The gods commented that this was too harsh, but Choi threatened to end the stream. Consequently, the monster left the girl's body, and Choi brought them both outside. Choi informed his viewers that from now on, he would be streaming from this channel. A few days later, another livestream by cameraman Choi is seen. Choi has returned home from the hospital but is shocked to find that his house has been destroyed by the monsters. Nevertheless, the gods were eager to see violence, so Choi quickly turns on his camera to start a fight. However, another hunter named Hanjo approaches him and turns off his livestream, revealing his true colors. Hanjo tells Choi that he is his senior and orders him to leave. Choi retorts that the real king is the one with more viewers and tells Hanjo that he has been streaming their whole conversation live. Embarrassed, Hanjo changes the topic and says that he will show Choi how to hunt a monster properly. A simian monster appears, and Hanjo attacks it with his lightning, but another simian attacks Hanjo from above and knocks him out. Choi taunts the simian and starts to run because he is not sure how much more powerful he has become after getting 4 gods as his viewers. He enters a church to fight while hiding. After a while, Hanjo wakes up and hears some noise coming from the church. He goes inside and is utterly shocked to see that Choi has killed a simian with the help of a holy cross. When Hanjo asks how he did it, Choi says that maybe he got help from God. Choi checks the reaction of his viewers and sees a substantial increase in his subscribers. He hopes that he will also get as many subscribers after the recap video is uploaded. Choi acts like a weakling and says that he was just able to survive this time, thanking all his viewers for their support. The gods taunt Choi, asking him if he has no conscience or if he has already forgotten them. Hanjo is utterly pissed off, and to save his reputation, he proposes a match to determine who is the strongest. Choi acts like a weakling again and asks if Hanjo wants them to fight each other. Hanjo explains that he meant that he would invite Choi to the MS collaboration hunt next week, where he will collaborate with the best monster streamer in the country, a woman named Kim So-yoon. Choi thinks that this is a great opportunity to film with someone like her and accepts the deal. A few days later, Choi reaches the Phimpo International Airport, which has been totally wrecked, and he remembers his past when he was all alone in a similar place. Suddenly, Hanjo arrives and orders Choi to follow him. They are both shocked to see a well-established military camp there. Hanjo apologizes to a woman named Kim So-yoon for being late, while Choi notices that she is flying and thinks she must have superpowers that she uses in her everyday life. Choi is impressed by her ability to use a superpower that requires an extreme amount of mental energy, and he thinks that she must be a pro at it. Kim So-yoon asks Choi to introduce himself and mentions that it's rude to stare at a girl like that. Choi apologizes and Kim So-yoon informs him that she already knows he is the cameraman. She then gets straight to the point and explains that their plan involves working all night for 3 days and 2 nights. She advises Choi to back out if he thinks it will be too difficult for him. Hanjo is shocked to hear the plan, but Choi, being a womanizer, says that even 4 days and 3 nights wouldn't be too difficult. Kim So-yoon challenges him and says they'll see about that. Choi confidently assures her that he won't disappoint her, and they shake hands with each other. A notification then appears, indicating that God's heart is beating very quickly. After 2 days of preparation, Kim So-yoon briefs them on their plan and asks Choi if he has any intention of joining the military. She also offers to bring him right under her wing. However, Choi politely declines the offer. Kim So-yoon then reveals that the monster buff Russ at Gimpo International Airport has recently become stronger due to an increase in their numbers, and only a small number of people know about this. Hanjo asks if they are trying to monopolize the hunting ground, But Kim So-yoon gets angry and explains that they pushed back the official announcement because they need to investigate it properly. Choi points out that the thing to watch out for when hunting buff Rus is the buffs they put on other comrades. They are no different from large cows when they are alone, but the difficulty of eradicating them increases exponentially when there are more of them. Choi suggests luring them to give buff to only one monster and then killing that monster. However, Hanjo says it's too dangerous to fight against a monster with stacked buffs, so they will just kill them one by one. Kim So-yoon agrees with Hanjo's plan and asks Choi to become the bait to lure the monsters. Choi agrees to the plan. Now, they all start their combined stream while fighting monsters. Viewers are shocked to see that Kim So-yoon and the cameraman are together. Choi greets his viewers and explains the standard procedure of targeting each buffa rock individually while they are off guard. He also points out that the first thing to notice is the buffa rock's buff ability, which can't be used on itself but can be used on other buffa rocks. Choi picks up a large airplane door and tells his viewers not to worry about So-yoon and Hanjo because they are veteran hunters. He suggests they focus on him instead and asks if anyone can guess the purpose of the door. He offers a horn of buffa rock as a reward for the first person to answer correctly. Thumbelina responds that the door is used for camouflage, and Choi promises to send the horn if he survives. Choi explains that buffa rocks are half-blind animals that perceive him as part of the landscape with the door. He jumps and attacks the buffa rock, breaking its horns. Although the creature is still alive, Choi attacks it again and acquires a mana stone. The main buffa rock that had all the buffs becomes smaller due to the loss of one buff. The gods, frustrated with the slow progress, make a serious decision and give Choi a donation. He sees something shining inside the monster's corpse and takes out a shovel from its body. However, it is too heavy for him, and the god suggests he goes to the gym. Choi uses the shovel to attack the monster, and he is shocked to see it die in a single hit. He then picks up the pace and quickly kills all the monsters. On the other side, the main buffa rock becomes considerable. Why slower and shorter? Suddenly, reinforcements arrive and attack the monsters. Choi notices that the gods are suddenly worried, and he wonders why. Then, all the hunters get cut by blades. We can observe a peculiar-looking blade monster flying in the sky. As a child, Choi had a loving mother, a beautiful little sister, and a doting father. However, one day, hundreds of thousands of swords rained down, killing everyone. The cause of this destruction was the Null Blade, a 5-star monster that has never been defeated. The Null Blade is currently in front of Choi, and even though the gods lament his tragic fate, Choi is laughing. He tells his viewers that he has been living for this moment his entire life. Choi attacks the Null Blade, but it causes light injuries to him. The Null Blade is a humanoid monster that possesses intelligence and the ability to learn. However, Choi has run countless simulations to defeat the Null Blade. In response, the Null Blade attacks Choi, and his camera falls. The Null Blade's power lies in its swords, which increase proportionally to the number of enemies it faces, making it theoretically impossible to defeat. Despite this, Choi manages to hit the Null Blade with his shovel, marking the first time humanity has ever hit the Null Blade. Choi believes that he can fight the monster with the help of God's powers and his trusty shovel. However, the Null Blade tries to flee, leaving all viewers shocked. Suddenly, Hanjo, also known as the Korean Thor, appears, claiming that he will be the one to kill the Null Blade. Hanjo attacks the Null Blade with his lightning, but the Null Blade summons 2 swords, and Choi realizes that he cannot fight it alone. As a result, the Null Blade escapes. Upon reviewing his stream, Hanjo realizes that he is in trouble. He suggests that they try again later, but Choi punches him in the face, calling it the biggest bluff rush that he has ever heard. During the fight, the number of god viewers increases from 6 to 11. Choi is now in the hospital and realizes that he did not expect to meet the Null Blade so early. However, he learned something from the experience. His shovel works against the Null Blade, and he will take his revenge next time for sure. Choi hears a crow cawing outside his window but realizes that it is a harmless monster called a crowicle. There are 2 types of monsters in the world: dangerous monsters and harmless monsters like the crowicle. The crowicle is a divination-type monster that tells the fortune of the area. If the left head is crying, it is a sign of bad luck, and if the right head is crying, it is a sign of good luck. Fortunately, it is the right head that is cackling, and Choi suddenly remembers his important items. He finds his mobile and camera and checks the latest news, discovering that the Nullblade has escaped to the south. Choi feels grateful that he managed to survive after fighting such a monster, thanks to the gods' sponsorship. He suddenly remembers his shovel. The gods continue to taunt Choi, sarcastically remarking that he has finally remembered his shovel. However, Choi couldn't find his shovel and decided to turn on his live stream. To his surprise, he received a lot of donations as soon as he greeted his viewers. He answered their questions and reassured them that he was not a superhuman. The reason why he was able to face the Nullblade was that he had been preparing for the sole purpose of revenge. Choi shared his past with his viewers, and he was angry that they had given up hope. He reminded them that he was just a normal human like them. However, the gods continued to taunt him, and suddenly a doctor entered the room. Choi wondered if the gods' interference had changed his body and if the doctor had found something wrong with him. But the doctor said something surprising: "No, you cannot call yourself normal." Choi was confused and asked the doctor what he meant. The doctor replied that it was impossible to call someone without superpowers a normal person. Choi was taken aback, and the doctor explained that he was just a regular civilian, but he was well trained. The doctor revealed that this was a monster disaster specialty hospital, and they had 15 years of experience in treating people like Choi. Choi was angry with the doctor because he promoted himself without Choi's permission. The doctor tried to change the topic and told Choi that there were many people who wanted to dissect him. Choi was shocked to hear this, but the doctor continued and said that they had conducted various tests on him while he was asleep. The results showed that Choi was a normal person, but their government buddies seemed to be skeptical. The gods were displeased to hear this and suggested that Choi wipe them out. Choi then asked the doctor about his shovel, and the doctor told him that the government had taken it to the research lab. However, the doctor had something more to tell Choi. They had found something out of the ordinary in his body. The doctor gave Choi a refined core and explained that a core could be considered the foundation of a monster. People who could resonate with the core and draw out its power were called superhumans. A superhuman could only use the power of the specific core that was right for them and was unable to draw out power from cores that didn't suit them. Choi responded by saying that he knew this and that he had been tested for it. The results showed that he was a normal person. The doctor then revealed that Choi was not a match for any core discovered so far. In other words, the core of a monster that hadn't been killed yet could be a fit for Choi. Choi felt that the doctor was giving him false hopes, but the doctor asked if he didn't want to become a superhuman and avenge his family. Choi replied that superpowers were just one of the ways he could take it down, and the superpowers didn't seem to work on Nullblade. Choi then asked if he could discharge himself now, and the doctor said yes, adding that Choi's body was totally fine. However, he should come back in a month. Even if it meant searching through all the databanks in the world, the doctor would find that core for Choi. The doctor explained that Choi had amazing potential, and if he gained superpowers, imagine what he could accomplish. Suddenly, the shovel appeared out of nowhere in the room, and Choi was amazed to see it. The gods told him to keep good track of it. Choi then went to the Monster Bureau, which was an international organization created by humanity to stand against monsters. The monster body is very profitable. For example, monster bones and leather can be turned into hunting equipment, and some of the meat is even turned into commercial food. Choi goes to the receptionist lady and asks for his reward. The receptionist was shocked to see Choi and asks, "Are you the camera guy?" Other people also get excited to hear the name of the camera guy. The people were doubting the capabilities of the camera guy as he looked very normal. Choi tells the receptionist that yes, he is the camera guy and he wants to receive his payments, but one man obstructs Choi and says, "I can't believe that someone like you scared away the Nullblade." Choi takes out his camera and starts streaming and asks, "Why are you suspicious?" The guy gets scared because they know what the public did to Hanjo because he troubled Choi in the fight with the Nullblade. Now Choi tells his viewers that he is in the Monster Bureau and waiting to pick up his reward. The receptionist hands Choi some papers, and when Choi reads them, he asks, "Do you know how many monsters I killed, and my shovel isn't included in the reward too?" Now Choi tells his viewer that the Bureau is cheating and a large portion of his reward is missing, not to mention his shovel isn't on the list and they are planning to take it away. Suddenly, a man comes running to Choi and says he is the assistant manager in charge and that the reward is small because most of the revenue has been sent to the hunters that were lost that day. Choi says that this is wrong. This is something that the Bureau figures out with their own funds, and whose consent did you have to take from my share? The assistant manager thinks if he makes any mistake here it will be the end of his career, but suddenly someone taunts Choi and says, "What do you think you are doing in this holy place that defends Korea?" His name was Park Jin-chong. He is not a monster streamer but a pure hunter, whose skills are only average. However, he is special because he is part of the older generation that first faced the monster invasion, surviving through much harsher conditions than what hunters face currently. He led the newer generation of hunters to prevent a repeat of the past and is currently the psychological pillar for hunters. When Park Jin-chong questions how Choi survived until now without the hunters who died for him, Choi replies with a bitter laugh. He reveals that on the day his family was slaughtered, not a single person helped him, and the government even fired a missile strike where he lived. Park Jin-chong is shocked to hear that Choi is not a hunter, but a normal person who faced the null blade. Choi then turns to the manager and demands his reward. He only wants to take his shovel and one horn of a buff Russ, warning the manager not to do anything funny with his shovel. The manager is surprised to see the shovel in Choi's bag because he was sure he saw it in the research lab. Suddenly, someone shouts Choi's name from the crowd, and it turns out to be none other than the idiot hunter Ilum. Choi looks at Ilum and thinks that he will be good material for the broadcast. Now we see Ilum and Choi facing off against each other on the ground, and Ilum claims that Choi was only able to fight because of that special shovel. Choi asks if Ilum came just to talk about something like that, to which Ilum responds that something about Choi is dangerous, and even with that shovel, it's not possible for an ordinary person to do what he did. Choi suggests that they fight like men with bare hands, but Ilum says he can't fight properly without his core. Choi agrees to let Ilum use his core. Ilum creates a fireball and says he will show Choi why he is called the fire sniper. He attacks with intertwined flames, but Choi jumps in between the flames before they intersect. Choi jumps toward Ilum and punches him in the face, breaking his teeth. Choi warns him not to ask for damage compensation, otherwise he will kill him. Choi tells his viewers that this is the end of Ilum's schooling, and he says that Thumbelina will get his reward by tomorrow. Suddenly, a bird appears and sits on Choi's shoulder. Choi is shocked to see the bird, as it is a little child Croacle. Choi tells Croacle that it's not good to sit on other people's shoulders, but Croacle shows affection towards Choi, so he keeps it. The manager, who was looking at everything from the shades, tries to take the opportunity to talk and tells Choi that he wants to talk to him, and he says that the association wants to have a good relationship with him. The manager says that he knows that Choi lives in a rented apartment, so the association will gift him a home, but suddenly the left head of the Croacle starts to shout, and that means it's a bad sign, and Choi realizes that something bad is going to happen here. Choi plans to get away from this area as soon as possible before he gets swept up in this situation. Suddenly something attacks them from the sky, and we see that pig-like monsters and birds are attacking them. The guards tell everyone to run to the association shelter, and all the civilians run towards the building, but the association closes the door to save themselves from the monsters while ignoring the people. A monster was going to attack a girl, but Choi quickly defended her and told her to run to the shelter. Choi turns on the camera and says, "I will be starting the extended stream." Choi says that he is a monster streamer who fights for the safety of the citizens, so please like, comment, and subscribe. But the numbers of monsters were even more dangerous for Choi. Each of those monsters was the size of an elephant, so Choi planned to attack the monster's weak spot. The weak spot of those monsters is their legs, which support the heavy body of the pig. If you deal with the legs alone, you can easily neutralize them. Choi thinks that the monster high pig won't be a threat if it doesn't have mobility, so he continues to cut off the legs of the monsters. Suddenly, the left head of the Croacle shouts, Choi gets alert, and suddenly, a high pig attacks Choi from above. Choi was astounded to see the accuracy of Croacle, and now Choi sees that Ilum is asking for help as he is totally surrounded by the monsters. Choi thinks that it's strange why all the high pigs are flocking to him. Could it be that the high pigs that like garbage were able to identify Ilum as human garbage? Choi taunts Ilum, saying that you must be the #1 garbage that even the high pig has acknowledged, and Ilum says don't spout bullcrap and help me here. Choi thinks of a plan to use this situation and throws stones towards the high pigs. Some of the high pigs change their focus towards Choi, and Ilum uses this opportunity to run towards the shelter, but the association people denied him entry, and we see that there are still a lot of high pigs that are following Ilum. This was the plan of Choi, to make the Asian people suffer a bit. The barricade was totally destroyed by the monsters who flocked to the shelter. Choi tells his viewers that, thanks to ILAM's wide area baiting, the high pigs have all flocked to the shelter, so we will now be going to save the civilians who couldn't enter through the entrance yet. The civilians have yet to enter the shelter, but the people inside aren't opening the door, so they're planning something. He runs towards the shelter while pulling the aggro of a high pig, and he tells everyone to dodge, and the high pig crashes into the shelter wall and breaks it. Choi orders everyone to run inside before the high pig flocks here. Now Choi addresses the hunters and tells them to gather around. Choi explains that due to the high pig's build, it can only come in one at a time. The hunters get motivated and say, yes, we can handle it if they come one by one, and everyone starts to attack the high pigs who are coming inside. Choi goes to help the rest of the people. Choi looks at the viewer's reaction and thinks this is good, and he thinks his null blade's strength increases proportionally to the enemy count. A one-on-one situation needs to be put in place without fail. So in order to make that happen, I need the most powerful right to speak, and the people who witness my performance and their trust will surely become my strength. Choi kills the last monster in the area, and the people thank him as they survive thanks to the camera guy, but suddenly the left head of the cockroach starts to shout. Suddenly, a very big, high pig attacked Choi from behind and injured him with its claws. When Choi attacks the monster, it dodges the attack, and Choi realizes that this monster is the head monster, but even still, this is just a big bird in front of him. But the monster takes Choi and flies and throws it on the ground, and as soon as the monster was going to kill Choi, someone says it looks like you were in a rough situation, and we see that Soyun has arrived there to help him, and she says she came here to pay back the help Choi gave at Gimpo Station. Choi kills off the monster with his shovel. Soyun says the debt has been cleared, and the gods are pretty excited as the atmosphere between the two looks pretty good. Soyun asks Choi, wasn't he admitted to the hospital? And Choi says he is recovering pretty quickly. Soyun says that her younger siblings watch Choi's video when she doesn't even look at hers. Choi was shocked to know that Soyun's siblings watched his video. Now Soyun departs to take care of other things, and Choi looks around and thinks there are a lot of secrets hidden by the bureau. Now Choi turns off his stream, saying he wants to do some cleaning up. Now another hunter approaches Choi and says, you are the overgeared camera guy, right? The hunter asks Choi how much money he wants to sell the spear to him for, and Choi tells him that it's a shovel, not a spear. Choi thinks that this was bound to happen soon, so what should he do now that suddenly a god makes a resolute decision and gives a donation? But Choi wasn't able to find any noticeable change in the shovel even after the donation. The hunter again asks Choi for the shovel, but Choi denies and says that it's not for sale, and if you bother me any longer, I will turn on the camera. The other hunters were also envious of that shovel. Now Choi buries the shovel in the ground, and he sees that suddenly there is a handle forming on the shovel, and he thinks that this is the donation that God gave him. Choi announces to everyone that as you all are aiming for my shovel, you all know the legend of Excalibur, right? So whichever person pulls this out with his bare hands without using any, Choi will give them the shovel. Everyone runs towards the shovel to try their luck, but Choi turns on his camera, and the hunters hide their faces and ask him why he is turning on the camera. Choi says this will serve as proof, and the hunter from before comes forward to try it first, even in front of the camera. He uses all of his strength to pull out the shovel, but the shovel didn't even budge. The other people moved him aside to try their luck, but everyone failed to take the shovel from the ground. Now the hunters blame Choi, saying that this is just a scam and there must be some sort of device holding it down, and they challenge Choi to pull it out in front of them. Choi agrees to pull it out in front of them. Choi tells them that this is just a terribly heavy shovel, there is no trickery in it. Choi pulls out the shovel from the ground, and suddenly, a huge tremor occurs and the ground starts to shake. Choi thinks that this earthquake is probably because of him, and the other hunter points out that the ground just split in two where Choi removed the shovel. Choi thinks that the function of this ring is to cause earthquakes, and the gods tell him that this is a surprise for him. The hunters were assuming that the earthquake was probably caused by the shovel, and Choi tells his viewer that the earthquake happened at a great time. Is this a coincidence? If you are curious, keep watching. Now Choi packs up his bag and gets out of the place. We see that the day is over and Choi has bought some ramen from the Naruto shop. Now Choi thinks about his long day and thinks that his body has already recovered from the fight earlier. Choi wonders why he got this opportunity and powers, but he ignores this fact and starts eating. We hear in the news that recently the monster had started to show very abnormal behavior, and this afternoon, dozens of high pigs attacked the association. The new reporter says that the camera guy was the one who helped the most, but he doesn't have any abilities. He is said to have a superhuman body and a shuttle of formidable powers. Suddenly, Choi gets a notification that a new god has entered to watch him, which excites him to go on a new adventure to go and meet her fan Thumbelina. Choi goes to the address that Thumbelina gave him, and it was the Pokemon Road, which is currently the most expensive land in the country because of its heavy security. A security guard stops Choi because he looks like a poor guy, and before Choi could say anything, he gets an electric shock from the gun. But the security guards quickly recognized him and asked if he was alright. Choi tells him that he is here because he wants to deliver the prize, and the security guards say they know about this and allow him to go inside even if it is against the rules. Choi goes into the IFT and thinks that he got help from a fan, and a lot of things have changed so far for him. Choi was astounded to look at the house, as it looks like a palace. Choi thinks that if he provokes the person named Thumbelina, he might get in serious trouble, so he rings the and hides after putting the horn on the floor. A cute girl comes out of the door and looks around. She finds the horn lying on the floor, but suddenly the cockatoo starts to chirp loudly, and Choi runs away from there before Thumbelina could find him. Choi thinks it's wrong to run away. He should be congratulating her instead, and the gods make fun of Choi and ask, has he never dated before? Choi suddenly gets bumped into a person, and we see that it is none other than Kim So-yoon in a very beautiful military suit. So-yoon looks at her and says, "You are the camera guy, right? So what are you doing at this apartment?" Choi says, "Why are you showing so much interest in me?" And So-yoon tells that she lives here, and wherever he goes, it's always accompanied by problems. Choi tells So-yoon to calm down because he is only here to deliver a prize to one of his viewers. They part ways. We see that the whole time Choi was holding a cockatoo in his hands, and the cockatoo was very angry. Choi looks at the crowicle and asks why his feathers are so shiny. "Did you eat something good without me?" Choi tries to find the core, which he kept in his pocket, and he realizes that crowicle ate the monster core, and he shouts at crowicle, but crowicle flies away, and we see that Thumbelina was looking at him from a window. Now we see that the head of the Monster Association was looking at the video of Choi where he is fighting with high pigs, and we see that Choi had given the work of handling the camera to our cute cockacle. The assistant manager reports that Choi is a very strong but very arrogant and rude person. He is extremely popular, but he has no connection with the association. The association says if you ask for a shovel directly, you will look like a villain, so we will give him a reward instead of saving the city. We will give him Hunter Newtown Mansion number 44, a house that rejects humans. Now we see that Choi has been invited to the association, and the manager was telling him that they wanted to give him a reward. They were going to provide Choi with a house located in Hunter Newtown in Gangnam. It is a place where you can collect all kinds of information in a class items. Gangnam was a bustling street in the past, but as it is situated in open plains, it became vulnerable to monster attacks, and it naturally became a place where hunters gathered in order to stop them. Choi knows that they have an ulterior motive behind this, but he still accepts the offer to find out their plan. Choi is now inside Hunter Town, and as he looks around, he believes that nothing has changed in these cities. The gods were nagging Choi to quickly start the adventure, and suddenly we see that the idiot Hanjo is also there streaming live, and he greets Choi and tells him that he also lives here. Hanjo tells Choi that he will guide him to his new home. Choi asks Hanjo why this place is quieter than usual, and Hanjo tells him that a large group of two-star monsters named Blow were found, so everyone went there to fight. Suddenly someone calls Hanjo, and Hanjo gets very scared and tells Choi to turn off the camera, and we meet some other native hunters who are purely thug-like hunters and not monster streamers. The thug hunter scolds Hanjo and says, "Finish your clown business and go join the raid." Hanjo makes the excuse that he has an appointment with Choi. The thug hunter looks at Choi and asks, "Are you a part of the monster streaming clown business too? Show me your hunter's license." Choi denies and says, "Why do I have to do that?" The thug hunter puts a knife on Choi's neck and says, "You are just a clown who cleans up small fries in the city. Do you think we are the same?" Choi challenges him to a fight and says, "Let's see who is the real clown here." A cute-looking police officer intervenes between them and stops the fight. Now Choi reaches the house that is designated for him. Hanjo looks at Choi's home and says it's perfect for living. If only we caught the null blade, we would be able to live on the Pokemon Road. Choi gets very angry after hearing this comment and tells Hanjo to go back to his own home. Hanjo says at least you should invite us for a tea. Choi angrily says, I don't know about the tea, but I can give you a little tea piece of my mind. Hanjo says your jokes are very harsh, and he will visit your home next time. Choi looks at the home and asks Croacle what he thinks about this new house, and suddenly, Croacle's left head starts to make noise after looking at the house. Choi says, as I expected, that it wasn't a normal house after all. Choi goes inside the house and checks all the rooms one by one, but he doesn't find anything strange, so he gets tired instead. Choi asks the Croacle that there is nothing strange about this house, so why did he cry earlier like that? The Croacle gets angry and starts to cry again, and Choi asks, why are you crying right now? And suddenly, Choi sees a blast outside from his window, and an announcement tells him that a breakthrough happened at the defense. Choi wonders he just arrived here, and the problem started to come here too, and suddenly a huge attack happens on Choi's house. We see that a rescue squad pulled out the debris to help Choi, and Choi was in good condition even after the blast. Choi thinks that probably Croacle cried earlier because of the monster named Blow. The left head of the Croacle again starts to cry, and we see that there is a bull-type monster, who probably goes to the gym every day, standing behind Choi. And it shoots fire from his mouth towards Choi, who is able to survive thanks to the Croacle, who made a wind shield with its powers. Choi feels the power of the wind helping him and thinks that even if Croacle is a baby, it's still a 2-star monster. Choi asks Croacle to continue pushing through the wind like that, and Choi cuts off the hands and kills the monster named Blow with his shovel. Choi takes out the core of the monster and offers it to Croacle to eat, but suddenly, 3 more monsters come rushing towards him. Other hunters were just filming this whole scene from the sidelines without helping Charlie. Currently, Choi and Croacle are in a very tough situation. As he was getting overwhelmed by those 3 monsters, the gods were also in awe to see Choi's performance. A certain kind of god wants to help Choi, and the god tells him to hold on to hope that you will soon get performance-based pay. Choi tries to stand up, and another god enters to watch him, and Choi gains some more strength. Choi was going to be struck by the monster's breath, but the kind god had brought in another god in the stream, and a notification tells Choi that he will get his performance-based pay. Choi looks around and sees that the time has stopped, and 2 dice appear in front of him. The dice roll in front of him, and he gets a sum total of 8. Suddenly, a large amount of energy enters Choi's body, which is chakra. Choi thinks he is overflowing with powers, and now he can clearly kill those monsters. Choi jumps between the monsters, and now he feels that the monsters have become slower, and he can see all of their movements. Now he kills off all the monsters one by one. Choi looks around and sees many hunters gather around him. The hunters were shocked to see that Choi killed 3 2-star monsters on his own. One hunter thinks that even if Cameraman is a hunter, his defense is similar to that of an ordinary person because he doesn't have any superpowers, so they doubt that Choi is really just a normal person. Now Choi looks at the place where his house was supposed to be, but now it's all debris. He looks around to find Croacle, and he sees that Croacle has already taken the core for dinner and is currently resting. Choi feels a little dizzy, and suddenly the ground starts to shake, and a huge tower-like structure with many cannons emerges from the ground. Choi looks at it with utter shock and thinks this is the fortress. He wonders why this fortress is so big, and other hunters deploy barriers to protect themselves. Choi knows that this isn't a normal fortress, and the hunters won't be able to face its attacks with their normal shields, but it's too late, and the fortress fires many missiles at once. Choi tries to dodge the missile, but he realizes that not even a single missile is aimed at him. Suddenly, all the missiles were stopped, and we see that Soyun had arrived there and used her telekinesis to control the missiles. She returns all the missiles to the fortress, but they didn't even scratch it. Choi was wondering why the fortress isn't targeting him while it is targeting other hunters, and at that time the raven's right head cries, which means it's a good sign. So Choi goes near the fortress, but the fortress doesn't attack him at all. Instead, it opens a door for him. Now Choi tells his viewers that he will be the first person to reveal what is inside the fortress. Choi enters the fortress, but it is very dark in there, so he turns on his flashlight, and he sees very large machines working there. Choi, who didn't know what it was, so he just bluffed to his viewers that this is his house. Choi finds a slime working and wonders if this is the 2-star monster fortress, and to his surprise, he also finds a house inside the fortress. Guys, let me give you some information about the fortress. It's a regional monster that changes into a building cave or shelter, and it can infinitely shoot self-produced cannonballs. To survive, it slowly takes away the energy of living things that live on top of it. Choi tells his viewer that he will take a look inside the room he found in the fortress. Choi looks and thinks that this room looks identical to the house given to me by the government. Does this fortress want me to live here? The god tells Choi that he is stupid, and another god gives him a hint by saying, chakra, and Choi realizes that the fortress's main source of food is human energy, and it really wants the chakra, which Choi got as performance-based payment. Choi sleeps inside the fortress, and during the night, the chakra affects Choi's body and changes it drastically. The next day, when Choi woke up, he was surprised to look at his body. Now Choi says farewell to the slimes who live in the fortress and goes outside. Many reporters and other people were waiting for Choi outside the fortress, and they started to ask about his experience inside the fortress. Choi uses his new chakra and quickly escapes from their sight and gets away, but he gets bumped by a very big person, whose name is Hoyong, and he introduces himself to Choi as the commanding officer. He offers the choice that he will give him equipment made by 4-star monsters and a team leader position if he joins his gang. Choi thinks that 4-star level equipment isn't something you can even owe. BTAIN with money, but they are nothing compared to Choi's shovel. Moreover, Choi has to fight the Null Blade alone to kill it. Hence, he politely declines the offer of Hoyong and tells his reason. Hoyin says you truly have the mindset of a true hunter. We see that 1 month ago the government made a contract with the Whirlwind Attack Team after investigating some abnormal behavior of a 3-star monster named Mastery, and they plan to sacrifice some hunters who aren't affiliated with the association to complete this plan. In the present, we see that Choi, who is also a hunter and is not affiliated with the association, gets a notification telling him that there is a monster outbreak near the Han River. Choi tells his viewer that he is going to defeat the 3-star monster Mastery all by himself. Choi notices an explosion near him, so he goes there to help, and we see that there are tons of monsters, which were probably produced when a frog and a fish married each other. Choi thinks of a plan to stop the horde of these monsters. He jumps and buries his shovel on the ground, and suddenly an earthquake happens in that area. Choi felt relieved, as he was not sure if the skill would come out, and a god told Choi not to look down on his donation. Choi looks around and thinks there are still too many of them. The gods again consider sponsoring Choi and send him another donation, and the god asks Choi to answer his phone. Choi assumes that God is playing with him by telling him to answer the call in such a situation. The frustrated god tells Choi to look at the handle, and Choi finds that there is something different about the handle, and he says hello near the handle, and we see that his voice has been transferred to the fortress, and the slime launches a missile to help Choi. The missile struck the area and killed all the mosquitoes in an instant. Now Choi says he is able to communicate with the fortress. This is an amazing donation and would be extremely beneficial in the battle. Choi says if it's such a mess here in the middle of the city, then it's obvious what it's like upstream of the Han River. We see that one monster is still alive, and he eats his own kind, which then evolves into a stronger monster. On the upstream side of the Han River, we see that there are tons of mutated fish that are attacking, and Soyun and the other team members are fighting against them. Soyun says that there are several times as many monsters as compared to the last year, and there are many types of mutation that they have never seen before. Soyun suggests getting rid of the main master before the situation gets any worse. We see that Hyung uses his defense skill to protect his comrades, and a soldier comes and informs Hyung that they just received the reply from the government, and they just simply stated that it's not different from last year. Hyung angrily asks, "Are they insane? There are just too many of them, but some of them are also evolving into predators with high speed or high defense." Soyun says we can't waste any more time, and she uses her power to create a ball of monsters and crush them. A man comes from behind and taunts them, saying that you are having trouble with a couple of mutant fish. He was none other than the Gale Raid team owner, Illick, and he ordered his Gale attack team to take care of those monsters. At first, the Gale attack team fired a rod-like thing on monsters and then used their lightning attacks to kill off a large area of monsters. Illick announces that from this moment forward, the Gale Raid team will take control of this hunt and take 80% of this loot. Other hunters exclaimed their dissatisfaction on these, and Hyang confronted Ilak and asked him, "Did you already know about this situation? Otherwise, how would you explain those weapons? You have too many lighting-type hunters and too much equipment and supplies for an ordinary monster hunt." Ilak says they are just a very competent team and don't bring down the Gale Raid team with your incompetent standards. Soy intervenes between them and tells them it's not the time to fight among themselves. Ilak goes to command his team and says we will proceed as planned, and they start boiling water so that monsters hiding inside the water come out. The monsters attack the fire hunters, but lighting gives them protection and kills off the monsters. Soon, a huge fish-like monster called Mastery comes out of the water, and Ilak tells his team to prepare for the next scenario. His team takes out an automatic harpoon and shoots the Mastery. Other hunters were wondering what the Gale team was trying to do, and we see that they used the harpoon to send lightning attacks directly to the monster's body. Ilum uses his superpower and makes the final blow by making a big hole in the monster's chest by using his own firepower. Hyang exclaims that Ilum has never had this kind of firepower before, and Soyun speculates that Ilak is probably wearing equipment that temporarily amplifies his powers. Ilak orders his team to take out the core before the monster revives. One of the hunters tells Ilum that it's different from last year. "I don't think it will be just one of them." Ilum taunts her and says, "Did you stick around to say something like that? I already figured that was the case." Suddenly, the second Mastery appears in the water. Ilak thinks that he has thoroughly imprinted his power on the masses, but in order to get his father to acknowledge him, he has to show that his second team can also successfully defeat the Mastery without him. Ilak calls his deputy team leader and tells him to kill the next Mastery without him, as they have to show that they are different from other teams. The deputy team leader announces that he will take the lead, and Ilak goes into his car and tells the driver to take him to his father. On the battlefield, we see that the Gale team is currently taking out the monster core, and they have already made the second Mastery collapse. As soon as they collect the core of the second Mastery, a third Mastery who was hidden in water attacks the man holding the core and eats both the core and the human. The Mastery evolves into a very strong Mastery. The deputy leader of the Gale team orders his team to attack with harpoons, but this time the harpoons aren't able to pierce the monster's body. They also tried to attack with lighting, but it had no effect, and the Mastery killed the frontline Gale team members. Hyang comes and saves the deputy leader from the attacks of Mastery, and Hyang tells the deputy leader not to lose hope and to rearrange his equipment and fight back, but the deputy leader says it's impossible to go against it and that you guys can become its prey, and the deputy leader runs away, leaving Hyang alone. The Master attacks Hyang, but Soyun stops the monsters with her telekinesis, and now the monster attacks Soyun, but suddenly the monster's hand gets cut off, and we see that camera guy Choi has arrived there. Choi asks the monster, "Are you the monster Mastery with 2 cores?" And he tells his viewer that now the hunt will begin. We see that after some time, Hyang, who fainted from the attack, wakes up and asks Soyun how he is still alive, and Soyun points towards Choi and says because he came here. As Choi was fighting, he thought that the movements in his body had changed, but he thought that the chakra he got from the gods was fully used. The gods were also surprised to see that Choi's body still remembers how to use chakra. Choi again cuts off the hand of the monster, but it just quickly regenerates again. Choi was astonished to see such fast regeneration, but he also noticed that the master was eating his own kind to regenerate this quickly. To confirm his suspicion, Choi uses the earthquake skill and creates many spikes from earth, which pierce the body of the monster. The monster quickly started to eat to regenerate faster, but this time it also copied the abilities of other monsters and used them as a weapon. Choi thinks that he would be at a big disadvantage if he fought here, so he again calls the fortress, and we see that the slimes were a little confused about which missile they should launch to help, and they send a missile. Choi was getting pushed back in the fight, and Croicle, who was filming everything with his camera and streaming live, made a good cry from his right head. Suddenly, a missile fell directly on the monster, but luckily, Choi had used his earthquake skill to defend himself, and Choi thinks that this missile was different from before. The monster was still alive, but it was severely damaged. Choi thinks of a way to kill the monster in one shot, and the god suggests he bring back the chakra. Also, a new god enters the stream. Choi remembers the feeling that he felt back then, and he focuses all his power in one hand and throws the shovel in the monster's direction. The shovel makes a big hole in the chest of the monster and separates the core from the monster's body. Hyung and Soyun were shocked to see the camera guy's true power. Choi looks at his hands and thinks this power is amazing, and Croicle, who streamed everything, took the core as payment and ate it. In the Gale Raid team's headquarters, we see that Illick is apologizing to his father by saying they encountered a very unexpected variable named DCHOI, and Illak's father, Yuyi, who was the head of the Gale Raid team, says it's a very pathetic answer compared to the incident he caused. Yuyi says to Illick that it looks like the team leader position is a very burdensome position for Illick, so he plans to give this position to camera guy Choi. Now Illak argues that he was the one who dirtied the name of Gale. Yuyi excludes his bloodthirst and says Illak is the one who dirtied their name. The woman standing behind Yuyi gets seduced by his powers, and Illak looks at her and thinks she is the one who probably told everything to his father, and Illak goes away to clean up the mess he created. Now Yuyi commands the lady to investigate camera guy Choi because it would be better to have him join our side than make an enemy out of him. Now we see that in the Monster Association, the chairman of the association was bombarded with questions from journalists, like, is it true that the association was already aware of the Mastery's mutation? Is it true that the bomb that fell on the upper point of the Han River was caused by the fortress? And is there any plan to deal with the fortress? Guys, let me tell you that no one knows yet that Choi can communicate with Fortress and also ask it to fire missiles wherever he wants. The chairman didn't have any answers, and they were trying to contact Choi, but the assistant tells the chairman that Choi has cut off all of his contacts, and he is currently inside the fortress, so no one can even approach him. On the other side, inside the fortress, we see that Choi is having a special episode, and he tells his viewers that today's main character is the fortress, and everyone is shocked to see that the real fortress is a cute slime. Choi tells the viewer that he is not only as squishy as he seems, but he also has a bunch of clones around in this place. He furt. Her says if you turn this guy around, but suddenly Choi's mobile started to ring, and he saw that the message was that the Null Blade had finally appeared in a part of China. The gods started to prepare to go abroad, and one god even went to exchange money for Chinese currency. Choi tells his viewer that he will have to change his content as he needs to go to China right now, but due to the appearance of monsters, going abroad has become extremely restricted and flight equipment has become a rare first-class asset. Choi tells his viewers that those who help him go to China will be invited into the fortress. Thumbelina thinks that he can't lose this chance no matter what Choi says in the comments, and he thinks that it's not easy to get a flight after all, since there is not a lot of flight equipment in the nation anyway. Suddenly, he sees the notification from Thumbelina, where she said that according to someone she knows, the government is trying to contact him, so how about he comes to an agreement with them? Choi looks at his phone, and it really has 26 missed calls, and he thinks that he kept avoiding the call because he didn't want to get dragged into something troublesome. But how did Thumbelina know Choi thinks she really isn't someone ordinary? Choi asks the political leader concerned with this matter to directly contact him in his live stream. The chairman tells his assistant to call the camera guy, and when Choi picks up the call, he asks him directly, "Can you get a plane?" The chairman angrily asks his assistant to call the camera guy, and when Choi picks up the call, he asks, "Can you get a plane?" The chairman angrily says, "Do you know how big of a request that is?" Ilum snatches the phone from the chairman and says the Gale Company will provide the plane. "So, are you ready to negotiate with us and accept the offer?" Now we see that Choi is inside a helicopter that is flying over western China, and the pilot lands in a totally barren land. Choi shockingly asks, "Is this the place?" The pilot informs Choi that this is the correct designated location and says once you are done, contact me, and I shall pick you up. Choi wonders if he will come back or just leave him here. He suddenly gets a call from a Chinese number, but he chooses to ignore the call. Choi tells his viewer that he will go wherever the Null Blade is, but suddenly a strange man riding a horse obstructs him, and he asks Choi to reveal which family he is affiliated with, but he asks this in Chinese. The gods were frustrated because of this miscommunication, so they again gave Choi a donation, and he now suddenly could understand a Chinese-speaking guy. Guys, I don't even know just how many blessings they can give to a single shovel handle at this point. We can just call it a holy shovel. The man warns Choi that he will strike him down if Choi doesn't reveal his identity. Choi excludes his energy and asks, "Can you even strike me down?" The strange man gets a little nervous, but Choi tells him to calm down as he only came here to catch a null blade. The man asks Choi if he is talking about the heavenly demon. "Are you a foreigner? Because your clothes and words are very different, and you don't seem to be a martial artist." Choi agrees and says, "Yes, I am," and he thinks that Chinese people call null blade the heavenly demon. The man laughs at Choi and says, "You think you would catch the heavenly demon? It might be nonsense, but at least your eagerness is that of a martial artist." Suddenly, the man remembered that his headmaster told him that soon there will be a man who will come from a faraway land to help us, so be ready to meet him. The man also looks at the crowacle and thinks that in my country this bird is considered a good omen, and the bird also tells his fortune. The man suggests to Choi that he will help him locate Null Blade if Choi comes with him and tells the people's fortune. Suddenly, the strange man takes out his sword and uses a long-range flame attack with the sword. Choi looks at the attack and thinks this is the power from the two starting monsters named Tolstoy. The strange man now tells Choi that his name is Hujin, and if he wanted, he would have already killed Choi with that sword attack, but he only had pure intentions. Guys, he is flexing his power against Choi, who probably won't even get a scratch from that puny attack. Choi didn't care to explain the power difference between them because he wanted a free guide for this area anyway. Choi introduces himself and says he is Choi Kong Shik, and the man says he is Ha Hujin, the 13th son of the Ha clan. When Choi went inside the town where people lived, he was shocked to see the condition of China, the underdeveloped buildings. He didn't an armor that match the current generation. Now Hujin tells Choi that this is the pride of the Ha clan, with 500 years of history, the Flame King Pavilion. Choi was shocked to look at the building and say, "Isn't this an entirely different world?" The guards denied the entry of Choi as he was a total stranger, but suddenly, a very hot woman in traditional Chinese clothes comes out and says, "Let Choi come in." She has thus permitted his entry. Choi looks around the house and thinks that the inside is also incredible, but are all the young women of the village here? The lady tells Choi and Hujin to take the elevator and go up. Hujin was shocked to hear this and tells Choi that there aren't many who have seen this object, but you can even get a free ride in it. They went inside the elevators, and we see that the lady was taking a peek at Choi's holy shovel. Now Choi goes inside the boss's room, and we see a fat man sitting on a chair, and he greets Choi and says, "Welcome to the world of Ha Huchang." Huchang orders the lady and Hujin to leave them alone, and now Huchang says that he has never been nervous in the past 60 years, but for some reason he feels nervous in front of Choi. Choi thinks that he looks quite young for a 60-year-old man. Huchang asks Choi if he has that expression on his face because he looks so young. Huchang says that the monster's core is not just a medium used for superpowers, it is the monster itself, so if you keep polishing it, you will be able to bring out the powers of your own body among other powers. He further says that Yuyi, who is the head of the Gale Raid team, is also similar to him. Choi realizes that Huchang had control of the information and dominated the village. Now, Choi straightaway asks, "Can you find the location of the Null Blade?" Huchang says, "Don't worry. My soldiers are currently looking for the heavenly demon. They will come back soon, so just wait for a bit." Huchang says, "You must be tired from a long trip, so my daughter will tend to you, so rest comfortably." The sweet and cute-looking lady introduces herself to Hu Lin and guides Choi to his resting place. Now Hu Lin was sitting beside Choi, and Choi asked Hu Lin to leave him as he wanted to rest alone. Hu Lin got freaked out and said, "The head had told me to attend to you with all my heart, so please don't tell me to go." Suddenly, she uses some kind of power and asks Choi to look into her eyes. She sits on Choi and asks him to show her the secrets that he is hiding. Choi pushes her back and says, "What nonsense are you spewing?" Hu Lin was shocked to see that her power didn't work and she couldn't read Choi's mind. The gods were very angry to see this and suggested that Choi focus on his chakra when he realizes that Hu Lin is trying to read his mind with superpowers. Now Choi gets angry and asks Hu Lin to explain everything. Choi focuses his chakra on Hulin's core, and Hen reads her Choi where the master Huchang had told Hulin to use her power on Choi and obtain that shovel. Otherwise, he will kill his brother Hujin. Choi was shocked to see that he can read her memories, and the gods tell her she has just used her powers by using chakra. Choi was astounded to learn that he can do this also with chakra. Moreover, if Hulin's memories are true, Choi decides to help her. Now they both go and confront Huchang, and Choi asks for an explanation, and Huchang says that they deliberately spread those rumors because the government is not paying any attention to their village, but if they can acquire that shovel, the government will surely stop ignoring them. Huchang suddenly takes out a gun and says that even if you have superpowers, you will die if you get hit by a bullet, so quickly hand over the shovel. Choi just simply throws the shovel towards Huchang and says, "Take this," but it's a little heavy, and the shovel falls on the leg of Huchang, causing a lot of pain to him. Choi uses this chance and hits Huchang on the face and knocks him out, but suddenly Hujin comes inside the room and says, "I was worried since I heard a loud noise." Hujin looks at the surroundings and misunderstands that Choi is a villain, so he has attacked him. Hujin angrily tells Choi that he believed in him, and he still did that, so don't think that you will return alive. Hujin attacks Choi, but Hulin comes in between and tells Hujin to stop the attack. So, Hujin asks, why is she helping an enemy? And Hulin shows Hujin all of her memories, which happened recently. Choi thinks that the iron monster's core is incredible. Not only can it read thoughts, but it can also transmit them. Now Hujin asks for forgiveness from Choi, but we see that outside the pavilion, the hot lady from before is causing a rebellion with the Black Wolf Squad. Choi asks Hujin what is happening here, and Hujin says that they are our bodyguards but that their stepmother is raising a rebellion with them. The stepmother asks him to hand over the shovel. Choi gets anger. Hwan says, "Do you think you own my shovel?" Hujin tells Choi to run away, and he will try to stop the guards. Choi tells Hujin to only protect himself and his sister, and Choi throws his shovel at the bodyguards. Hujin was surprised to see such raw strength, and Choi says, "If I decide to slay you." Well, you know the rest of the dialogue, right? Choi jumps on the ground and kicks the asses of all bodyguards. On the other side, we see that Hujin and Hulin are inside the boss room, and they see that the core in the hand of Hu Qing is shining. The core takes over the body and uses Huchang's body to revive itself. It was a 3-star monster named Super Spider. Hujin tries to fight the monster, thinking that it won't be as strong as it just became, but he gets his ass kicked by the monster. When Hujin sees that the monster is going to attack Hulin, he suddenly feels some extra power from the core, and he attacks the monster and gives it a fatal attack. The super spider had intelligence, and it was agonizing in pain, so it jumped towards the stepmother so it could acquire a new host. The monster jumps towards stepmother Choi, who looks at the monster and wonders where the hell did a super spider pop out from the spider and starts to make a cocoon around stepmother. The monster runs away after capturing the stepmother, and all the bodyguards follow the monster. Choi was astounded by their foolishness as they ran towards a monster without a plan. We see that the spider has laid traps in a den, and it catches the bodyguard with its web. The bodyguards are shocked to see that this monster has intelligence enough to use traps. We see that the spider has been totally infused with the stepmother, and believe me, guys, this is the worst transformation I've ever seen. Where are the mommy milkers of the stepmother? The mommy monster now kills off the bodyguards, but Choi arrives and saves them. Choi looks at the monster and tells his viewer that it's a bit different from the super spider that he knows and that there is an extra bitch infused with these monsters. Choi suddenly gets a call, and we see a man from the helicopter telling the camera guy to stop streaming if he wants to keep his life safe. Choi angrily says, "Get lost. I am very busy right now," and cuts off the call. The croacle gives a bad omen cry, and Choi thinks that the bird didn't even caw at the time of mastery, so he's in even more danger now. Choi looks at the helicopter and realizes that it is the Red Dragon Attack Force, which is ranked 4th in the world. Choi decides not to fight the monster because it's not his concern. The Dragon Attack team attacks the monster from the sky, thinking that the spider cannot attack back, but to everyone's surprise, the mommy monster uses a shockwave, which is also used by the bull monster. After attacking with a shockwave, The spider uses her web to trap the helicopters. We see that the croacle is making a good sign cry, and Choi asks how this situation is a sign of good fortune. Choi thinks that the monster used the ability of the bull monster because the host girl might have had the superpowers of the bull monster. Choi plans to run away from here without fighting this monster, but the gods start to nag him to fight, and Choi tries to reason that he is not capable of fighting that monster. But the god tells them that their donations are on standby, and after hearing this, the child gets super excited and says that real streaming will start now. The head of the Red Attack Squad was utterly shocked to see a single variant monster obliterate the whole Red Dragon attack team. The main reason why they lost was because of the stepmother's memories. The monster had all the knowledge about technology due to her. Now Choi attacks the monster, and when Spider saw the shovel, she felt terror from it, and she believes that she must destroy the shovel. The monster plans to absorb Hoojin and Hulin first to become stronger so she can fight properly, so she flies towards them. Choi realizes that the mommy monster is pursuing those siblings, but he lacks the means to catch up to her. He notices that his shovel has grown longer and heavier, and he is unable to move it. He wishes that the shovel would shrink in size and become small. To Choi's surprise, the shovel really shrank and became smaller. Choi notices that there is a new mark on the shovel, and he believes that this is the new donation made by God, through which Choi can now control the length of the shovel. People watching the live stream were astounded to see that the shovel could now change shape and size. Choi puts one end of the shovel on the ground and stands on the shovel so that he can travel the distance using the shovel's increased length. On the other side, we see that Mommy Monster had captured Hoojin and Hulin, and as she was going to kill Hoojin and Choi, someone suddenly appeared behind the monster. And we see that the shovel now looks like a very long pole from a stripper club. The monster attempts to attack with a shockwave, but Choi shrinks the shovel back and destroys the Mommy Monster's core. Now Hoojin and Hulin thank Choi for saving their lives, and Hulin asks Choi if he is going to leave from here, and Choi says after all, he has completed all his work here, and also the shovel is ringing, which means something must have happened to the artillery. Hulin offers herself and asks if she can come with Choi. Choi gets close to Hulin and uses chakra to show her his own past. Hulin was pretty shocked to see Choi's past. Choi tells him that he must walk this path all alone, and a helicopter arrives to pick up Choi. Now we see that Choi is looking at the news, and it's about how he defeated the variant spider, which even the Red Dragon wasn't able to beat. The news lady tells us that due to this incident, the ranking of the top MS hunter has changed. Currently, the first ranker is the great hero of Africa, who is blocking an army of Antwerpy alone, and the current 5th ranker is the character who caused the sudden change in ranking of an MS cameraman. The expert says that he has a doubt that the shovel might be a monster because, in this world, there are many monsters like Fortileries who are not organic beings, so there is a possibility that this shovel may be an unknown monster of said type. Choi thinks that it's better if they think about the shovel in that way rather than knowing the death, and we see that the helicopter is currently flying over the Sea of Death. Suddenly the gods get excited and ask Choi if he is ready, and Choi wonders why they are suddenly acting like this. The crow also gives a bad sign by crying. A massive ant-like monster attacks and damages the helicopter. Choi looks at it, and realizes it's an entropy, but he is shocked because an entropy is here, so far away from Africa, and this monster is also a variant, which has wings. Before Choi could attack the monster looked at Choi and just left from there at a very high speed. Now, Choi lands in his own country, and we see that Ilum was waiting for Choi to pick him up and take him to the Tempest headquarters. But Choi denies it and says he will go on his own and doesn't need any help. Ilum says he brought a Bugatti to escort him, so he must come. Choi gets angry and says, "Do you have any ulterior motives?" and angrily asks him to spill everything. Ilum tells you that he doesn't know anything about the plan. He was only ordered by the second team's captain, Alak, to escort you. Suddenly the shovel started to ring, so Choi leaves Ilum and jumps directly off the roof. With the combination of the new abilities of the shovel and chakra, Choi created a unique movement method for himself. He uses the chakra to change his direction, nullify air resistance, and literally become like a human bullet. The gods were also excited to see this new method and were enjoying it. Choi lands in front of the fortillery, and a man comes out of the fortillery with his life force sucked out by the slime, and the man asks for help and collapses. When Choi asked Slime what he did to the member of the Tempest Squad, the slime had a smug face and was looking very proud of his achievement. Choi went inside and investigated the other squad members, discovering that the attack squad came here only to find the rare iron monster's core, which is beneath the ground, and they were captured and nearly killed by Choi's slime friends. Choi realizes that the Alak most likely wanted his assistance in this case, which is why he sent his man to pick him up and request assistance. Choi thinks that the mind-reading ability of the Iron Core is really quite incredible, so he lets the squad members go. Now Choi thinks about what he should do about the slime guys. Tea will be burdensome if they cause an accident because they are hungry. One slime comes and sticks towards Choi's leg, and Choi realizes that the slime is eating his chakra. The slime grew bigger after eating some chakra. Now that Choi has checked the date and says today was the day of Miss Thumbelina's home visit, shall we slowly head over to guide on the other side? We see that some scientists are checking the helicopter from which they came back, and they conclude that the monster that attacked them was clearly an Antropy. Antropy is an ant that avoids hard work. It has the inclination to enslave and capture humans and has an incredible breeding speed, due to which it transformed all of Africa into a living hell a long time ago. The appearance of a winged variant, it is clearly indicated that there is another queen inside or right near our country. Now we see that all of the hunters have been issued summonses because of this appearance of the winged variant of Antropy, and it has been declared an emergency situation. On the other side, we see that Choi is traveling with his shovel and reaches the Pokemon apartment, which is the most expensive area to live, but Choi notices that there are many hunters gathered there at such a late hour. Now we see that Soyun comes out of the Pokemon apartment and informs other hunters that she was having a conversation with her sister about why she was a little late. The cheap Thor suggests that they all head off as they have all gathered here, and he tries to flirt with a lady and says that ladies always come first, but the lady tells him that Choi is the only one for him, and the cheap Thor gets angry after hearing Choi's name. Choi speculates that they might be gathered because of the Antropy incident and doesn't give it much thought. Now that Choi has trespassed into the window of Thumbelina's apartment, we see the gods getting sweaty palms because they just entered a girl's house. A girl comes out after hearing the commotion in her window, and she is surprised to see Choi, and she mutters "gang," because she is unable to pronounce Choi Gangshik's full name. Choi thinks she is trying to call him a gangster, and he frantically says, "I am not some gangster." The girl, who is probably Thumbelina, gets pretty shy and closes off the window curtain and says, "I didn't expect that you would drop by so quickly, so give me some time to get ready." Choi responds, "Yes, I came here early because I used a special method to get here." The girls become excited and inquire, "Did you come here using the shovel?" Choi suddenly remembers her younger sister, who was also very childish, just like Thumbelina. Thumbelina emerges from her room after a while, dressed nicely. Thumbelina suddenly asks Choi if the Antropy monster was strong, and she further adds that if it were the cameraman who defeated the variant Super Spider in a single blow, of course it would be easy for them. Choi says we cannot be sure about the victory because there may be very different kinds of situations, and Thumbelina says Choi is a very good person. The gods suddenly ask Choi about his child plan, and two gods start to quarrel over whether a son or a daughter would be better. Then Choi asks Thumbelina if they should depart for fortifications, and Thumbelina asks if she is also going to use the shovel. Choi suddenly grabs Thumbelina in his arms and tells her to grab him tightly, and Choi jumps off in the air. Choi inquires about Thumbelina's well-being, and Thumbelina responds that it is a little scary but exciting. And Thumbelina says that it's a little scary but exciting. She has always been sick, so it was difficult for her to move around. Choi thinks that if her sister were alive, she would probably be a lot like Thumbelina. Suddenly the Croacle makes a cry of misfortune, and we see that an Antropy attacked them. Choi puts the shovel in the monster's mouth and extends its size, thereby breaking the mouth of Antropy, and then he attacks at the core of the monster and kills it in one blow. Choi lands on the ground, and Thumbelina says that Choi is really the best, but the Croacle again makes a cry of misfortune, and we see that there are a bunch of Antropies in the sky coming towards them. Choi tells Thumbelina to hide behind the boulders while he fights with those monsters, and then Choi extends his shovel and goes on a killing spree, slicing 4 of them at once. Choi, the last monster, ignored fleeing and moved directly towards Thumbelina. Choi was too late to save Thumbelina, but suddenly someone fired a gunshot towards the entropy, and we see that it's none other than our godly sniper Slimes. Choi praises Fort Lewis and says, "You guys sure know how to do a lot of things." The monster was still somewhat alive, so Choi finishes off the monster and thinks that even weapons of force aren't enough to kill them. Choi apologizes to Thumbelina for accepting his invitation. She was caught up in these, but Thumbelina says it was an incredible battle, and she is happy to see this battle in person. She asks Choi if this is the daily life of the strongest hunter. Choi was embarrassed to hear this, but he looks at her dirty clothes and says, "Let's go to your home first." Thumbelina was very excited to see cute and squishy Slimes. Now Choi shows her his room, and Thumbelina says his room is even wider than it was in the last broadcast. Choi shows her the shower facility and tells her to wash up. As soon as Thumbelina goes towards the shower, a barricade blocks Choi's way, and the Fordillery tell Choi that there is no entry for men. Choi asks them just what they think about Choi, and God also tells them that this would be considered sexual harassment, so they plan to call the police. Choi was very angry because even the gods were teasing him. Choi tells Thumbelly not to ask Slime if she needs anything, and we see that there is again a smug look on Slime's face. Thumbelina kisses the Slime and says, "You are very amazing. I just want to take you home." Choi wanted to go with her not because he is a pervert but because he was worried about her safety because, at that time, Entropy was aiming for Thumbelina instead of him. Choi wonders if there is anything different about this girl. On the other side, inside the hospital where Choi was admitted, we see the doctor get proof of something and call Choi and ask him to come to the hospital tomorrow. Choi says he is a little busy the next day, so he can't come. But the doctor says there is no way that you would not come because it's a story about you and the Null Blade. The next day, we see that Choi is waiting inside the cabin of the doctor, and the doctor arrives with a top-secret document in his hands. He hands the documents to Choi, who is utterly shocked to see the documents. The report was about the people who survived the Null Blade invasion. The doctor says that the time and place are all different, but these are all survivors of the invasion, and to be more specific, they are the people that the Null Blade had left alive. Choi gets angry and asks the doctor, is he saying that Choi is the person that the Null Blade left alive? The doctor asked him if he ever wondered how he managed to live. Choi remembers his past, where his father sacrificed himself to save his life, and he tells the doctor that because his father blocked the Null Blade, the doctor asks how your dad blocked those bastards' blades, which can cut through steel like paper, and, even if he did, why the Null Blade didn't kill you right after that. Choi inquires as to what the doctor wishes to say, and the doctor responds that Choi may be a suitable host for the Null Blade Corps. Asks what the doctor wants to say, and the doctor says that Choi has the possibility of being a suitable host for the Null Blade Corps. Choi says just because he is a survivor doesn't mean anything, but the doctor says they have evidence for it. At these documents, every survivor is unsuitable for any other corps, hence there is a possibility that they are suitable for an unsecured corps, and the most decisive evidence is that the survivor's body shape and bone structure are over a 90% match. They think that the Null Blade is leaving suitable hosts alive, and it may be that if a suitable host wields the core, they might turn into the Null Blade. Choi didn't want to believe this, but the doctor reminded him that he himself saw the scene of a core acting as a seed to turn a human into a monster. The doctor says that there are many things that they don't know about the core, and there is a possibility that some of those survivors are also Null Blades. Choi comes out of the office thinking that the Null Blade could be a human, and there is a possibility that he could also become like them. Choi remembers a dead family and says it doesn't matter if they are humans or not. He will use whatever means necessary to absolutely kill them. Suddenly, a young girl comes running towards Choi, asking for help, and Choi looks at her and thinks she is the sister of Thor Hanjo. Choi asks how she knew Choi was here, but the girl asks Choi to help, otherwise his brother and other hunters might die right now. We see that Hanjo has started his broadcast and tells his viewer that there are some other hunters beside him, the Ice Prince Monsu, the best healer Miho, and the goddess Kim Soyoon. They are here for the entropy subjugation, but they notice a lot of holes and fire in the area, so Ice Prince Monsu uses his power to put out the fire and Lee Miho uses her power to create a healing circle, but there was only one survivor. The survivor attempts to warn them, stating that there is something other than entropy, but his voice abruptly fades away. Kim So-yoon wonders why this man is moving his mouth without any voice, and she suddenly realizes that the sound is actually disappearing. Hanjo notices Kim So-yoon's unusual behavior and tries to ask her something, but his voice also fades away, and the viewer notices that suddenly there are a lot of blasts in the area and the stream went off. We see that Hanjo's sister was showing this stream to Choi and telling him that this was the last time they were able to see his brother, and she even tried to call him but he didn't answer. Choi was a little reluctant because he didn't have enough information, and the only thing he could see at the moment of attack was the explosion and smoke, and then suddenly the disappearance of the boy. Choi assures Hanjo's sister that even if he can't find his brother alive, he will definitely bring back his cousin. Now we see that Choi has landed at the airport, and he also notices that it's overwhelming quiet here and there are a lot of holes. Choi assumes that these holes are probably in someone's way, and he asks Croacle to turn on the broadcast. Choi tells his viewer that he will go hunt the monster named today, but suddenly, Choi's voice also disappears. A huge snake-like monster named Silence attacked Choi, and Choi made a cut on his body, but the monster recovered almost instantly. Choi thinks that this monster is huge and that it is also not normal because this one probably grew larger after eating the heavy sound of the heavy rain yesterday. The monster tries to flee back to his nest, but the voice of Choi returns, so he tells his viewer that this monster's main diet consists of sound, and they especially like the sound of humans screaming. Therefore, there is a pretty high chance that the missing people are still alive. Inside the cave, Kim So-yoon is trapped, but she regains consciousness. She can't use her power because the venom of silence is causing addiction in So-yoon and distracting her focus. So-yoon thinks she can't die here because she can't leave her sister alone. Suddenly, a light flashed on Kim So-yoon, and we see that it was Miho who did that, and So-yoon asks her why she was looking totally fine even in these situations. Miho says that she is a dual-core superhuman, and one of her aptitudes is silence, but it was no help in battle, so she forgot about it. But her body has immunity to this venom. Miho purposefully throws the venom on So-yoon and tells her that she can't use her abilities because of the venom, and she laughs at Kim So-yoon's situation. Miho expresses her desire for So-yoon's death because she has spent her entire life being shadowed by Kim So-yoon, and everyone refers to her as the next generation of Kim So-yoon. Miho further explains that she is most jealous of So-yoon's attitude, like how he pretends that other people are even on her radar. So-yoon tries to tell her that it's not true, but Miho kicks her and says that you will die here today, and she tries to drown So-yoon in the venom. The venom starts to sip into So-yoon's body, but suddenly the ceiling of the cave breaks and cameraman Choi and the real cameraman Croacle jump in. Choi looks around the cave and tells his viewer that this is the silence monster's nest. He plans to save the injured first. Miho suddenly clings to Choi and tells him she is very terrified, but Choi notices that Miho looks completely fine in this place. Now Choi notices that So-yoon is in a grave situation, so he pushes the Miho girl and goes towards So-yoon. Choi tells So-yoon that the monster will show up soon, and he cannot rescue everyone without So-yoon's help. So-yoon says she can't concentrate because of the venom. Choi encourages her and tells her that she isn't a weakling, and she isn't a shrub hunter unlike others. But suddenly the monster appears and attacks Miho Choi. He wonders why the monster specifically attacked Miho, but he plans to use this opportunity to kill the monster. But he cannot destroy the monster's core because Miho is stuck inside the monster's mouth. We see that So-yoon has gathered some strength and is trying to stand up. Choi thinks he can't do anything because Croacle is streaming everything live, and he will be dead if anything happens to Lee Miho. The monster attacked Choi from behind, and Choi wasn't able to notice because of the absence of sound, but we see that the tail suddenly stopped because our goddess Kim So-yoon had used her superpower despite the venom. Kim So-yoon throws the monster on the ground and even saves Lee Miho from falling. Kim So-yoon collapses due to using so much strength, but she still uses her power to throw off all the venom from the surrounding. Lee Miho was surprised to That she was saved by Kim So-yoon. But now Kim So-yoon falls to the ground due to heavy fatigue, and the monster charges towards her. But the cameraman stabs the core of the monster, who somehow manages to escape and hide. Lee Mi-ho asks So-yoon why she saved her even after she did all these things to her, but suddenly the monster attacks Lee Mi-ho from behind, and So-yoon uses her telekinesis to save her. But Lee Mi-ho angrily throws off her telekinesis from her body, and the monster engulfs her. Choi somehow manages to save So-yoon on time, and he tells So-yoon to focus on the enemy for now, but So-yoon cannot hear her, so Choi tries to tell her with sign language that they must defeat the monster by combining their strengths. So-yoon understands him and creates a barrier to protect themselves from the venom, and she also holds the monster still using her powers, and this time Choi perfectly breaks the monster's core in half and completes the monster's subjugation. Now Kim So-yoon is in a hospital, and she is wondering what happened to Mi-ho because the rescue team wasn't able to find her body even inside the monster corpse. Suddenly, Thumbelina, our Kim So-yoon's sister, arrives in her room, and So-yoon asks her how she came here alone as she has a very weak body. Thumbelina says she is a lot better nowadays, and we see that a very little slime is giving her energy and hiding inside her hair. Choi had gifted this little slime to Thumbelina because the slime can absorb and release energy. Thumbelina hides this fact because she thinks that her sister might get angry because the slime is still a monster, and the slime gets angry hearing this. Kim So-yoon assumes that her sister has surely made a new friend. Now, Thumbelina asks if she is alright, and So-yoon tells her that this much is manageable. So-yoon says she benefited because of Choi because, at that time, the amount of power she used was 3 times more than she could normally use. The slime gets tired of hiding inside Thumbelina's clothes, so Thumbelina quickly says goodbye to her sister and gets out of the room, and she apologizes to the slime. Now inside the fort, we see that all of the slimes are doing some construction work and repairing a jet plane, and Choi was inspecting their work. Choi had found this broken plane at the airport, and the government officials even laughed at him for picking up this junk. Choi didn't understand even the fundamentals of the structure, but everything from the house to the fortillery is made of scrap metal, so nothing is impossible for the slime army. The slime army had also prepared a very new and advanced missile to kill the large area of monsters. Choi activates his stream and informs his viewers that he has prepared some surprise content for everyone, and it is not some cliched unboxing. Choi says that this is the test launch for the state-of-the-art anti-large monster missile, which will be launched into the middle of the sea. Choi starts the countdown to launch the rocket, but the rocket suddenly launched at the count of 7, and even the location of the missile was also changed towards the city. The viewers started to yell at Choi because the missile was headed towards the hospital, and we see that the missile turned into a huge number of smaller missiles and attacked the vicinity of the hospital. Choi was completely devastated by this scene, and he believes that this is the end of his career and that he will be going to jail now. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please check out these awesome videos and like and subscribe to my channel.